sanctioned no-fly zone over Libya. March 24th, a 6.8 magnitude earthquake strikes northeastern Myanmar, destroying buildings and taking the lives of over 70 people. Tremors are also reportedly felt in cities as far as Bangkok and Hanoi. March 25th, during peaceful protests across Syria, tens of thousands strong, troops opened fire, killing at least 20 demonstrators. March 29th, President Bashar al-Assad accepts the resignation of his Syrian cabinet. Now we're done with March, on to April. April 1st, with less than 2 hours to spare for the US debt ceiling deadline, a tenuous agreement on the federal budget is reached, narrowly avoiding a government shutdown. April 27th, in one of the worst tornado seasons, 137 separate tornadoes devastate the South, killing nearly 300 people in 6 states, with the state of Alabama claiming the most fatalities. And also on April 27th, in an effort to quash controversy due to mounting pressure, President Barack Hussein Obama II released his long-form birth certificate. The document, dated August 4th, 1961, supposedly proves that he was born at Kapiolani Maternity and Gynecological Hospital in Honolulu. However, widespread controversy and criticism has emerged, claiming the document is a forgery created with multi-layer alterations. Such criticism has unfortunately not fazed the greater American public. April 29th. In a landmark display of international patriotic pride, the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton is witnessed by a massive 3 billion people. Interestingly, the date of this wedding also coincides with the 66th wedding anniversary of Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun. Now we're done with April, on to May. May 1st, President Barack Obama announces on national television the killing of Osama bin Laden following a firefight in a military compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Bin Laden, who has been claimed by the US government to have been both the leader of the terrorist organization known as Al-Qaeda and the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks, was then swiftly taken away, and his body was reportedly dumped into the North Arabian Sea in what some refer to as a traditional Islamic burial. Such news was received by the American public as a catharsis for the war on terror, and as such nationwide celebrations erupted. It is also speculated by some that the announcement of bin Laden's death, which by any measure was certainly not the first made by any media source, served as a distraction from the criticism arising from the supposed forgery of President Obama's birth certificate. If this was the case, for the vast majority of the American public, it was greatly successful. Interestingly, the announcement of bin Laden's death also coincides with the 66th anniversary of the announcement of the death of Adolf Hitler. May 4th. In a historic development, 2 rivaling Palestinian factions, Fatah and Hamas, agreed to sign a reconciliation accord, redesigning the Palestine Liberation Organization. May 5th. In a crackdown of the uprising against 4 decades of authoritarian rule, Syrian security forces launch a door-to-door raid in a Damascus suburb, arresting at least 286 men. Also on May 5th, due to heavy flooding in the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, residents in Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky and Arkansas are forced to leave their homes. May 22nd, a 3/4-mile wide tornado, one of the most vicious tornadoes in American history, hits Joplin, killing at least 140 people and injuring hundreds more. Nearly a third of the city was destroyed and around 2,000 buildings were damaged, including water treatment and sewage plants. Now we're done with May, on to June. June the 1st. More tornado activity hits America as 4 people are killed 200 more are injured, and several buildings are destroyed by 3 separate tornadoes in Springfield, Massachusetts. June 3rd. Despite the national internet service being shut down, which has proven crucial to organising protests, Syrian civilians create some of the largest anti-government protests in the face of a brutal government shutdown that has killed more than 1,000 people. The protests were fueled by the torture and killing of Hamza al-Khatib, a 13-year-old boy. Marches are dedicated to him and other children who have been killed during the uprising. June 5th. A deadly E. coli outbreak in Germany, which causes bloody diarrhea and in extreme cases acute renal failure and death, has claimed the lives of 45 people, and ill health in 2,600 people has been linked to domestic sprouts. The farm in northern Germany where the sprouts are grown has been shut down. June 8th. The Obama administration orders the deployment of armed drones and fighter jets to Yemen to strike militant suspects supposedly linked to Al-Qaeda in an attempt to inhibit military cohesion during the unrest caused by the retreat of President Ali Abdullah Saleh. June 11th. Thousands of residents leave their homes for evacuation centers as 2 wildfires in Arizona combine to form a 600-square-mile blaze named as the Wallow Fire. Despite the efforts of 4,000 firefighters and the expense of $15 million, investigators claim that the fires were likely started by an unattended campfire. June 13th. Due to increasing flooding, the Missouri River rises, rupturing 2 levees and sending floodwaters towards small communities in Missouri and Iowa. Evacuations, which were ordered 6 days previously, show their necessity, as it is expected to remain at flood levels for at least the next 2 months. June 14th. More than 538,000 acres of farmland, 32 homes, 4 commercial buildings, and 36 outbuildings have been destroyed as the Wallow Fire still rages through East Arizona and New Mexico in what has become the largest in Arizona's history. Now we're done with June, now on to July. July 1st, Minnesota Democrats and Republicans failed to meet the July 1st budget deadline, causing the government to shut down. State employees are sent home without pay. Parks, historical sites, the Minnesota Zoo, among many other state services, are forced to close. July 6th. In an effort to relieve Greece's national debts, European bankers and government officials meet in Paris. Despite warnings and fierce opposition from the European Central Bank and rating agencies that all debt relief plans being discussed would amount to no more than default by the Eurozone, meetings to discuss relief plans still continue. Officials are hoping Greece can bounce back out of default within hours or days. However, there is speculation that a default by Greece could incite an economic panic similar to the one born from the 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse. Negotiations are extremely tenuous as the gravity of Greece's default weighs heavily on the security and cohesion of the Eurozone as a whole. July 8th. The space shuttle Atlantis is launched from the Kennedy Space Center near Orlando, Florida, carrying 8,000 pounds of spare parts and supplies to the International Space Station in its final mission, marking the final flight of the Space Shuttle program. The program, in conjunction with NASA, has overseen 135 flights since it began in 1981. And it will unfortunately come to an end when the Atlantis returns to Earth in 2 weeks. July 9th. Thousands of people flood the streets of South Sudan's capital in celebration as Juba Salva Kiir, South Sudan's president, signs the interim constitution and the Republic of South Sudan declares its independence, becoming Africa's 54th state after more than 50 years of campaigning. July 11th. Following numerous allegations of hacking into voicemail accounts, The News of the World, a British newspaper owned by Rupert Murdoch, the largest media mogul on the planet, is discontinued and shut down, and as a result, Murdoch's News Corporation experiences a sharp stock price fall. Not surprisingly, Murdoch's News Corporation also withdraws its $12 billion bid to buy British Sky Broadcasting. Prime Minister David Cameron orders 2 separate investigations, which eventually lead to the resignation and arrest of Rebecca Brooks, former editor of the News of the World, on suspicion of illegally intercepting phone calls and bribing the police, and the resignation of Paul Stephenson and John Yates, 2 senior Scotland Yard officials. Interestingly, both officers have ties to Neil Wallace, a former deputy editor at the News of the World, who was also arrested on suspicion of phone hacking and bribing police officers. July 19th. With the August 2nd deadline to raise the $14.3 trillion debt ceiling on the horizon, members of the House and the Senate, as well as President Obama, worked to agree on a budget deal to lower the deficit. 6 senators presented a bipartisan proposal to reduce the deficit by nearly $4 trillion over the next decade. However, if a deal is not reached by the debt ceiling deadline, the US would be forced to default. Now we're done with July, on to August. August the 1st. Narrowly avoiding complete debt default, the US Congress decides to raise the debt ceiling by $2.4 trillion and impose cuts of $1 trillion in spending over 10 years. In addition to a bipartisan committee to recommend $1.5 trillion in additional budget cuts by November. The Treasury have warned that if Congress fails to act on this new committee's recommendations, automatic spending cuts will be forced. August 6th, in reaction to the police shooting of Mark Duggan of Tottenham in London, combined with long-felt and growing resentment within the general public in regards of police brutality, economic disparity and racial tensions, riots break out in Tottenham, Enfield, Lambeth, Camden, Walthamstow, Oxford Circus and Islington. Opportunistic rioters smash and raid shops and set vehicles on fire as separate riots and lootings break out up and down the United Kingdom over the course of 2 days. Just to also let you know, I have covered this topic in one of my previous shows, so for more information, please refer to the beginning of my MISC Q&A Round 4 podcast. August 27th, evacuations are ordered for 2.3 million people as Hurricane Irene moves up the eastern seaboard, killing at least 44 people in 13 states and causing an estimated $7 billion damage. New York, Philadelphia, Washington and Boston all shut down mass transit systems. Airlines cancel flights to and from the eastern states, and Amtrak announces cancellations of train services. August 30th. While still in the midst of the aftermath of the earthquake, tsunami and nuclear disaster earlier this year, as well as not to mention the resultant economic strains and continuing debt struggle, Japan's finance minister Yoshihiko Noda is elected prime minister by the nation's parliament. Now we're done with August, on to September now. September 9th. Similar to how police were ordered to observe the riots across England, Egyptian security forces were ordered to watch as thousands of protesters attacked the Israeli embassy in Cairo, Egypt. When riot police eventually stepped in to shut the violence down, protesters fought back with stones and Molotov cocktails. The clash resulted in the deaths of 2 protesters and left at least 1,200 injured. Also on September 9th, extensive droughts and high winds facilitated wildfires that ripped through and destroyed thousands of acres in Texas, killing 2 people. 500 homes in Bastrop County, east of Austin, have been destroyed. 25,000 acres have been consumed and 5,000 people have been evacuated. September 17th. Activist organisation Adbusters lay the seed for the Occupy Wall Street movement by staging an occupation in the financial district of New York City, otherwise known as Wall Street. Again, I have